6 p.m. on a Monday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. North Korea fires off missiles again, and another nuke test seems inevitable. All this sending a message that nothing will deter it from its nuclear ambition. South Korean President Park Geunhye issues a firm reminder to senior secretaries and politicians fixated on matters related to the upcoming elections. Put the people first. And U.S. President Barack Obama is in Havana to meet Raul Castro and the Cuban people, the first time a sitting American president has done so in almost 9 decades. South Korea and the United States held their first round of high-level talks on the sanctions on North Korea in Seoul on Monday. The U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Policy Sung Kim and the U.S. State Department's Coordinator for Sanctions Policy Daniel Freed met with South Korean officials at the ministry this afternoon. Kim told reporters after the meeting that the two had a very productive session with the South Korean side and that they vowed the closest possible coordination in fully implementing the UN Security Council Resolution 2270. When asked for an assessment of China's stance on the matter, he said Beijing made very clear it intends to fully implement all provisions of the resolution. Sung Kim is expected to hold separate talks with South Korea's top nuclear envoy Kim Hong-kyun Tuesday. North Korea launched several short-range missiles into the East Sea this afternoon. This comes just 3 days since the regime sent 2 mid-range missiles skyward. The series of provocations seemed geared toward voicing discontent over a regularly scheduled annual Seoul-Washington combined military exercises. For details, let's connect to our Kim Hyun-bin, who's standing by at the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul. Hyun-bin, what's the latest?
Well, Daniel, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said on Monday that the North launched 5 missiles from near the northeastern city of Hamhung and Hamgyeongnam-do province from 3:19 p.m. to 4:05 p.m. Now, the missiles flew around 200 kilometers before falling into the East Sea. Experts believe the missiles were fired from the North's new lead-to-flow 300mm multiple rocket launcher. Now, this is the North's 3rd missile launch in less than 2 weeks, with the latest launch of 2 mid-range missiles on Friday. The regime has launched 15 missiles since sending a satellite into space atop a long-range missile in early February. Military officials believe the latest provocations represent an armed protest against the annual military drills between Seoul and Washington. Now, North Korea says the drills are a rehearsal for a northward invasion, while South Korea and the U.S. say they are purely defensive in nature. The drills are expected to continue through the end of April. Back to you.
All right, thanks for those updates, Hyun-bin. Moving on, South Korea remains vigilant as recent satellite imagery indicates the possibility of another provocation from up north. The threat comes as Pyongyang is ratcheting up tensions with short and mid-range missile launches. Connie Kim looks into if North Korea is prepping for another nuclear test.
North Korea fired 6 short-range projectiles in the East Sea soon after the United Nations Security Council unanimously passed its strongest sanctions to date on North Korea in response to its nuclear and long-range missile tests. Over the 3-week period, Pyongyang launched short and mid-range ballistic missiles in an apparent protest to the annual South Korea-U.S. military drills. North Korea continued its belligerent rhetoric through its official newspaper, Nodong Sinmun, on Monday, calling the joint exercises a desperate attempt of the mentally weak. Adding to the growing concerns, the U.S.-based North Korea monitoring website 38 North recently cited satellite imagery, showing that the Punggye-ri nuclear test site remains active and is capable of supporting additional tests at any time. The test site is where Pyongyang conducted its 4th nuclear test in January. Seoul says it's also keeping close tabs on the possibility of a 5th nuclear test.
North Korea is capable of carrying out a 5th nuclear test immediately. Seoul is preparing for every possibility.
However, many experts doubt that North Korea will carry out another nuclear test anytime soon.
It hasn't been that long since North Korea conducted a nuclear test. Considering that the next test needs to be an actual hydrogen bomb test, it's unlikely Pyongyang will conduct an additional nuclear test in that short a period of time.
Although Pyongyang isn't expected to conduct a nuclear test anytime soon, the general consensus is that the North Korean leader will continue to order the firing of missiles to gain the attention of Seoul and the international community. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Back here in South Korea, President Park Geunhye has weighed in on the election debate, calling on the nation's political parties to remain focused on their responsibilities and not on campaigning. Also, she stressed to the Korean people the need for unity to combat North Korean threats. Song Ji-sun shares with us the president's latest remarks.
President Park warned that by taking their eye off recovery efforts, Korea could once again slide into turmoil similar to that experienced during the 1997 Asian financial crisis that rocked Korea and most of Asia. With a handful of economy-reviving bills pending at the National Assembly, she called on her senior secretaries and politicians to do what they can to improve the people's livelihoods, saying the economic clock should not be stopped for the election.
지금 선거 때문에 많은 것이 멈춰 있지만 정치가 멈춘다고 경제도 멈추고 민생도 멈춰서는 안 될 것입니다. 가장 중요한 것은 민생이라는 것을 우리가 잊어서는 안 됩니다.
With the possibility of the North conducting a fifth nuclear test at any moment, President Park said national unity is what will stop Pyongyang's acts of aggression. She noted that over 5,000 South Koreans have died as a result of North Korean provocations since the Korean War ended. The president also said a ceremony will be held on Friday to commemorate those who died protecting the West Sea, with the 6th anniversary of North Korea's sinking of South warship Cheonan falling on Saturday. Park stressed the importance of readiness both on the diplomatic and military fronts in response to North's reckless provocations, and added that Seoul's diplomacy on the international stage will decide the future of the Korean peninsula and the unification of the two Koreas. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea's political parties scramble to prepare for the nation's general election, which is now just over 3 weeks away. There is unrest within the parties, which are trying to wrap up their candidate nominations ahead of a 2-day registration period that starts Thursday. Shin Se-min has the latest.
The ruling Saenuri Party held a closed-door council meeting Monday morning as the process of whittling down the final few candidates continues. The party has remained mum on whether Yoo Seung-min, the party's former floor leader, will be put forward or not. The political heavyweight has a previous record of clashing with President Park Geunhye over the administration's promise to expand social welfare without raising taxes. The party's nomination committee chairman, Lee Han-gu, a key President Park ally, revealed late Sunday that the committee is waiting for Yoo to step away from the nomination process voluntarily. On the other side of the political spectrum, the main opposition Minju Party of Korea has revealed its latest set of candidates for the April 13th election. The party has its own issues, though. Some in the party are upset that interim leader Kim Jong-in has been nominated for yet another proportional representative seat, marking the 5th in his political career. In response, Kim refused to participate in party affairs on Monday, saying that he does not want to return to a party where he is mistreated over such a decision. The minor opposition People's Party is also facing dissent within its ranks over its nomination process, which has kept it from finalizing its proportional representative list. Party supporters, unhappy with the camp's decisions, barged into its Supreme Council meeting Monday to express their discontent. The infighting at the parliament is backfiring on the political parties as the approval ratings for the ruling Saenuri Party edged down, according to a recent pollster on Monday. But the nomination feud is likely to continue for the time being, or at least until the candidate registration session begins later this week. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea and Japan are scheduled to hold their first bilateral working-level talks since their recent landmark agreement on Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women before and during World War II. Seoul's Foreign Affairs Ministry announced Monday South Korea's newly appointed Director General for Northeast Asian Affairs, Jung Byung-won, will meet his Japanese counterpart Kimihiro Ishikane in Tokyo on Tuesday. They will discuss a broad range of issues of mutual interest. Topping the list will be follow-up measures on the implementation of the December 28th agreement, which includes the establishment of a foundation by Korea through which the Japanese government is to compensate the victims of Japan's wartime atrocities. Arriving on Air Force One, U.S. President Barack Obama touched down in Havana on Sunday a symbolic end to more than half a century of hostility. Obama will hold talks with his Cuban counterpart Raul Castro. EG1 has more on this trip that would have been unimaginable even a couple of years ago.
The President of the United States touched down in Cuba on Sunday local time. This is the second time in history that a sitting U.S. president visited the island nation and the first time since 1928. Upon his arrival, Obama greeted the Cuban people through social media, showing his eagerness to meet with them. Obama's first stop was Havana, where he met with staff at the U.S. Embassy and a walking tour of Old Havana. On Monday, he's scheduled to attend a state banquet hosted by Cuban President Raul Castro at the presidential palace following a summit meeting. During the talks, the two leaders are expected to discuss steps to deal complex issues, including Cuba's political and economic reforms. President Obama is also expected to give a public speech regarding political prisoners and human rights, sensitive topics for the Castro administration. He will also meet with dissidents and attend an exhibition baseball game between the Tampa Bay Rays and Cuban national team. Obama's visit is highly significant as it opens a new chapter for both countries after decades of animosity between the former Cold War adversaries. However, Obama's itinerary does not include a meeting with the 89-year-old communist revolutionary Fidel Castro. 이지원, Arirang News.
We turn our attention to some alarming figures over Korea's household debt problem, which has been released recently. According to a new international report, Korea's household debt is rising at one of the fastest rates among emerging economies. For the numbers and more, let's turn to Hwang Ji-hye.
Korea's household debt rose at the second fastest pace among 19 emerging economies last year. According to a new quarterly report by the Institute of International Finance, the household debt to GDP ratio rose over 3 percentage points in 2015 from a year ago, following closely behind China. The household debt burden on the population was also the third highest, following Singapore and Hong Kong, with the average amount of Korea's household debt per person standing at $29,000. Korea's record low key rate of 1.5%, coupled with a set of aggressive stimulus measures last year that included packages to prop up the country's real estate market, have been stoking concerns of a worsening household debt problem. The Bank of Korea says the amount of debt currently stands at around $1 trillion, taking a toll on the country's overall spending. With that, the government last month introduced new guidelines that toughen lending requirements, and experts say such measures will prevent the debt issue from dampening the country's overall growth potential.
As long as the quality of debt is improved case by case, even if the overall amount increases a little, each household will be able to better manage it.
Still, many experts cite the snowballing household debt issue as a potential risk to the Korean economy. The IIF also says the pace of growth is alarming, which needs close monitoring. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
The number of full-time homemakers in Korea is falling as more women join the workforce. The latest data bucks a decade-long trend which had seen the number of stay-at-home moms swell. Kim Min-ji gives us this report.
Jo Ju-yeon has been working for 8 years. She is one of a growing number of women in Korea who have decided to stay in the workforce instead of giving up on a career after getting married and having a child.
There are money matters too, but besides that, my husband has been helpful in doing his part. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to take maternity leave despite there being a policy due to the disadvantages I may face upon coming back to work.
And with more women following suit, the number of full-time homemakers is on the decline. According to Statistics Korea, the number of full-time homemakers came to around 7 million last year, down 0.8% from a year ago. That's down for the second straight year, following a 2.1% drop in 2014, the first since relevant data began to be compiled in 2000. The agency attributes a drop in full-time homemakers to a highly educated population of young women in their 20s and 30s who are joining the workforce. On top of that, it's becoming more difficult for families to make ends meet with just one spouse working. In the 25 to 54 age group, the percentage of economically active married women rose from under 50% in 1990 to almost 60% last year. Although it's a significant jump, the big picture isn't all that rosy. The majority of female workers in their 40s and 50s are in temporary positions, and the percentage of working women ages 15 to 64 is 55.7%, below the OECD average of 58%.
At the end of the day, policy shouldn't just be aimed at bringing women back into the workforce. Like some advanced countries, Korea needs to make paternity leave compulsory. There needs to be a dual caregiving system where men do their share of roles typically assigned to women. This approach will not only encourage women to work, but will also help the low birth rate issue.
The Korean government is hoping to raise the percentage of women in the workforce to almost 62% by 2017, but experts say that instead of taking steps to boost the figure in the short term, more constructive policies will be needed to improve the situation over the long term. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
That's all from us at this hour. Thank you for watching.